Hello and welcome back to Sunday Reads with Renee here at the channel Simply Renee. My name is Renee and I'm going to be sharing with you my summer reads completion of everything that I read this summer. And I originally set out to do 30 novels, but unfortunately I only got to 27 of them, which I wasn't surprised by. I had about 5 left towards the end of this week, and unfortunately I can only do 2 of the 5 instead. The ones that I missed were K8ll Your Darlings, Happy Land, and Jackal's Mistress, but I'm going to move them into the fall reads instead, so I'll be able to do some of that of which I was not able to do during the summer. Now, before I begin just telling you my basic opinions about these books, I want to let you know that some of them do have uncomfortable topics to it, but I'll be leaving trigger warnings ahead just to give you an idea so that when you go into reading these books, if you haven't yet, you'll be aware of the depictions in them, so please be sure to be on the lookout for that. Also, spoilers are ahead because I will be revealing some plot details. I'll try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but it might come out, so please be forewarned that spoilers are ahead. Now, for this segment of Sunday Reads with Renee, I'm just going to do my basic opinions instead of full fleshed out reviews, what I liked, didn't like, how I felt about the books. But I'm also going to be sharing you my fall reads at the end of this video, so I hope you enjoy, and here we go. Margo's got money trouble. So this was an interesting summer read for me at the beginning of when I was reading for the summer of 2025, and that's because it deals with a young woman finding herself in a situation where she needs to figure out a way to provide for herself and the struggle she has with family and relationships and the choices she made. And I did like Margo as a character. I thought she was a very interesting one. She kept me gravitated to the book and reading it, and I did like how she came into her own in her own way. Now, one of the controversial things about this book I found when I read it for my book club was that some people couldn't get past the fact that Margo goes into the OF industry as a way to make money and support herself and the child she unexpectedly became pregnant with and now has decided to raise as a single parent. But I did like the fact that, it did portray the OF career more as a sense of empowerment for Margo. It's not something I would do, but it did create that whole sense of empowerment for herself as she makes the choice to do what she feels is best and how she turns that into a career of self-empowerment and fulfillment for herself. And I did like her relationship with her father, even though there is that estrangement, and some of my book club members kind of would have liked to have more detail about how they actually would deal with the issues they've had for a long time. But I like the relationship that Margo did have with her dad. I thought it was nice that he did support her, even though knowing my father, he wouldn't support me in my OF career. But, I appreciate that he did want to try and help her and support her in that situation. And I did like Margo again as a character. I thought she was an interesting one, especially as a young woman, finding herself in a situation and trying to figure out what's best for her, her child, and the life she's going to lead. So these books, Real Men Knit, Emma at 83rd Street, and Love Chai and Other Four-Letter Words are ones I'm going to do in one full swoop because they were part of my Rhode Island Romance Book Club. Now, I did like Real Men Knit. It's kind of a comfy, feel-good romance about 4 people who have lost their mother recently and try to keep her knitting shop open and have struggles with that. And they also have a little bit of romance with a young lady named Carrie who was connected to this knitting shop and how she forms a relationship with the youngest brother who's trying to make it work as best he can. And that's because they see this shop as the center of their community in Harlem. It's really a place where people come, even if they're not big on knitting and crocheting. They come there because it's a sense of community. It's a place where they feel gravitated to and what connects them into good times and prosperity, as well as just feeling the place of connection, family, community, and neighborhood. And the romance between the 2 characters was nice and everything, but I really like the sense of community a little bit more. And I did like the fact that the author decided to focus on men and their feelings and their personal journey, especially in a romance book. And I like the fact that they had the men trying to figure out with this knitting shop as well, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Meanwhile, Emma at 83rd Street is very much a modern version of Jane Austen's, not novel, Emma. And I really liked this version. I felt it was good to bring Emma into a more modern sense. It had been done before, but I like how these authors took it there and how they portrayed it very well. And I liked how they had Emma being a college student studying art history, living in New York, and it did keep pretty much well with the Jane Austen plot line of Emma, even though it's more of the modern version. And I did like the relationship between Emma and George Knightley. I always did, even in Jane Austen's work, but I like how the author kept that good rapport there in Emma at 83rd Street. So not much to say about this, but if you are a Jane Austen fan, then this modern version of Emma at 83rd Street is a very good one. I know some people don't like Emma. She's a very decisive character in the Jane Austen world, but I like her because I feel she's the more developed of the Jane Austen heroines and goes through the most growth personally as well. And I feel Emma at 83rd Street did that pretty well for a modern romance novel. And then finally, last but not least, there's Love Chai and Other Four-Letter Words. And I did like this book by Annika Sharma because I thought it was great to have some of the South Asian influence and culture in this novel. I liked how it dealt with family dynamics, trying to overcome your past, bringing Indian culture into it. There was some discussion in my book club about how they didn't like the bucket list that was in there, where it talks a little bit about things you could easily do very quickly in New York for a weekend where the book takes place. But I personally liked how it tied in with the romance novel. It fit well with what you see with a lot of tropes in romance novels. And I do recommend it. And also try Chai if you haven't, because it is really good. So Emily Giffin is an interesting writer who I have been wanting to read for a long time, and I finally decided to do it this year with 4 books: Something Blue, Something Borrowed, Meant to Be, and The Summer Pact. Now, I knew when I was going to read some of Emily Giffin's work, I wasn't sure really what to expect. I had only seen the film adaptation of one of her works, Something Borrowed, so I decided to read it, and I think they're good contemporary reads, but I did not like Something Borrowed and Something Blue. Now, Something Borrowed is Giffin's debut novel from 2005, and Something Blue came a couple years later as a sequel. And the reason I didn't like either of these novels, is because I just couldn't really stand the characters. I understand what she was writing about, which is about 2 women that had this friendship, but they're very opposites. And you have Rachel, who is the good girl and stands in the shadow of Darcy, who's the more fun, exciting, lovelier, prettier girl. And I can understand in the realm of mid-2000s why this was written the way it was, because we had that kind of era of pick me, my best friend is prettier and I'm in the shadow of her, and that kind of thing. But it doesn't really gravitate to me 20 years later because I'm a little older and wiser, as is Emily Giffin. She even said in an interview, I think 5, maybe a little bit more than that, years ago, where she said that, her writing has changed because she's grown up and she's evolved as a person, which is reflective and true. There are some things I loved 20 years ago that I don't love so much. And I think if I had read Something Borrowed and Something Blue 20 years ago, I would have liked it and enjoyed it because I was younger and in a different space. Now, it's not to say that Something Borrowed and Something Blue are bad books. They were quick reads that I liked in different aspects. Something Borrowed was really about personal journey for Rachel as she comes into her own and gains more confidence, but she still had this brief liaison with her best friend's fiance, and that doesn't always sit well no matter where it was. Interesting plot line, of course, but not something I really gravitate too much anymore. And when it came to the best friend, who is Darcy, I did like the sequel, Something Blue, which helped to bring Darcy into a more calmer self-reflection and personal journey for herself. So it was good in a way to have that come as a sequel so we could see Darcy get some kind of karma, but also go through her own reflection as well. So both these books are good in their own way, but they're not ones I'm going to read again just because I didn't like the characters or enjoy them, and I didn't really find them to be very intriguing. So that's just how I feel about those 2 books. As for her other 2 works, Meant to Be and The Summer Pact, these are more of her recent releases in the last couple of years and really show how Emily Giffin has evolved as a writer. Now, I did like Meant to Be. It's one of those old school tropes of class divides and these two people, one from a wealthier class, one from a lower class, meet, fall in love, and have this connection. But they're also having to deal with their own personal traumas and past and the things going on in their own lives. And I did like the characters, and I felt that these two could grow and have love, but they also dealt with the reality of that sometimes maybe love just isn't enough. Now, the ending itself, which I won't reveal too much, is uncertain with me, but it makes sense for where the plot was and how it was going. It's a very interesting way, and again, this is a trigger warning as well, so just be careful with that. Now, when it comes to the Summer Pact, I did like the Summer Pact. I thought it was a very interesting one in terms of the fact that it deals with friendships and relationships, but more so friendships, where these three friends make a pact that they're always going to be there for each other in tough times after tragedy. And it goes through 10 years later where they're having those struggles and coming together, but finding it to be a challenge. I did like the theme of friendship, and while I wasn't too big on the book, I liked how it explored adult relationships, their friendships, and how they all come together at the end. And the ending to me made sense, but I wasn't too much of a big fan of it. Still, I did enjoy the book, and it really shows how Emily Giffin has evolved as a writer into a more mature one that comes forward. And just a word of warning, there is a trigger to this. The Tommy and Tuppence series by Agatha Christie. So this was a good one for me to do because I'm an Agatha Christie fan, and I hadn't read Tommy and Tuppence in a long time, and I decided to reread the works, and I'm really glad I did. I see them as an underrated duo who are a perfect match in every single way. They're fun, they like to solve mysteries, but there's also some drama and dark moments within these books, and I really think that it's great that we are getting a more modernized version of it next year on BritBox. I would prefer a more period drama, but modern version I'd like to see because sometimes the modern take can be an interesting way of doing it with Agatha Christie. But as long as everyone enjoys Tommy and Tuppence, I'm here for it. Now, in terms of this Tommy and Tuppence series, it was 5 works, 4 novels, 1 short story collection. And of the ones I will put down and list are here. So as you can see, it was a list of By the Pricking of My Thumbs, The Secret Adversary, NRM, Postern of Fate, and Partners in Crime. Now, Partners in Crime was a short story collection, and in my own opinion, I don't think Agatha Christie was very gifted in short stories, but not everyone is, and that's okay. And I still would recommend reading these because if you're looking for some Tommy and Tuppence with short mysteries and don't want a more long 200 plus, 300 plus page novel of mystery, then Partners in Crime is for you. But the reason I put By the Pricking of My Thumbs at the top one is because I felt that was really the best within the series. I felt it was very dark and very edgy. It was a very interesting one for when it was published in 1968. So I do recommend reading it, but it does have some heavy stuff in it. So trigger warning there. And of the other ones, The Secret Adversary was the debut that introduced us to Tommy and Tuppence. And I thought it was a very interesting, fun, yet dark mystery. NRM was very good. And Postern and Fate, I think, was the more weaker of the novels, but it was actually Christie's final work, and by then she had been very sick and sadly passed away in 1976 from illness. So it makes sense a little bit to me why it may have been off at that point, but it's not a bad novel, but it's not really up to the level of what her writing was in the past or even by then. Other than that, I did enjoy the Tommy and Tuppence series. It was great to really come back into Agatha Christie more because it's been a while, and I enjoyed reading this underrated detective duo couple, and I hope you read them as well and enjoy them as well. Sleep by Honor Jones is an interesting novel. It's part coming of age, but most of all it deals with trauma. So trigger warning, there is discussions in this novel of essay as well as trauma and violence. And what's interesting about Sleep is that it does weave between the past and the present, which is fitting for what the storyline is going through. Now, what's interesting is that you have a character named Margaret who is newly divorced with 2 daughters, but facing the trauma and the reality of what she hasn't been doing for the last 20 plus years. Now, what happened with Margaret is that as you go through her past and her present and the memories. She's actually dealing with a trauma and realizing, hey, my brother wasn't exactly the best person I thought he was. Oh, my mother was a controlling individual. So it is interesting in the fact that it has a lot of family dynamics. It has Margaret's personal growth come as well as her coming of age years ago, but it also has her facing the trauma of what she needs to face in order to move forward in her life. But it does explain why she's very protective of her two daughters. And something about Sleep that I did like was that it was well written. I wasn't really a huge fan of the book, but it was a well written book. Nonetheless, be forewarned that there are graphic depictions in the novel, including with essay. Flashlight is a good one that I did like. It deals a lot with trauma, especially generational trauma for the main character, Louisa. Now, when Louisa was a young child, her father died in a drowning, and it's very traumatic for her because she was there that day and experienced it, but she's now blocked it out entirely because the trauma was too much for her, understandably so. And now the years have gone by, and she's now become the caretaker to her physically ill mother. She's struggling to connect with people in general, people in her family, people in her culture, people in her life, especially supposed friends. And she has to figure out how to really navigate this while also trying to find her autonomy because she's now the main caretaker for her mother who is physically ill, but she struggles with that because Louisa wants the autonomy. And Flashlight does create a nice little symbol in this book that reflects her independence, her freedom, but also her trauma because her father was carrying a flashlight the night that he passed on. So it is actually a very good book about family dynamics, self-exploration, and personal journey. So it is one that I do recommend if you're interested in that type of plot and the themes and everything. So I do actually recommend it because I thought it was a good book. Disappoint Me, I liked a lot more than I thought. I thought this was an interesting look at a character named Maxine, who is a tea woman. Bear in mind, I'm saying that because I don't know how YouTube feels about the actual world. But basically, Max is someone who has transitioned from one gender to the next, is 30 years old, and still trying to figure out her life and where she wants to be. Now, for Maxine, they begin a romantic relationship with a man named Vincent, and they connect really well. Feels she's found someone to spend her life with, but there's a lot more challenges ahead. Vincent comes from a more traditional family, at least that's what I got when I read the book. There's complications in their relationships and their individual past, but I really like the character of Maxine because she lives her life in a more darkly funny, sharp, witty way. She's someone that I gravitated to because she's still trying to figure her life while trying to grapple with her identity, not really feeling like she fits anywhere in the entire world because of just how much there's a lot of controversy surrounding that identity, and she doesn't fit in with the LGBTQ plus community, but she doesn't fit outside it either. So those were interesting ways of looking at her development as she goes forward in her personal journey. Now, the ending was something that I didn't like because I didn't make much sense to me in some ways, but maybe if I ever reread it, it will make sense. But I do think Disappoint Me was a very good book in a lot of ways, not just because we have a character who's tea, but we also have a character that you relate to because you feel their understanding of trying to find personal journeys. I am cisgender, and I still have struggles even in my 30s with finding my identity. Even in my early 30s especially, I had those struggles with finding out who I was and where I want to be and what I want from life, which is what Maxine also deals with as well, but from a different perspective, of course, because they are a T and they're trying to navigate me. So I do recommend Disappoint Me. I thought it was a good book with a lot of funny, sharp wit to it. I thought there was a lot of dark moments, of course, so trigger warning there. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was good. I did like the character of Vincent, even though he drove me a little loopy at times, but I did like it. And I thought some of the family dynamic and friend dynamics were pretty good. So I do recommend Disappoint Me. Meet Me at the Crossroads is a book I wasn't too much a big fan of, but I did like the idea of speculative fiction with these two sisters and these seven doors and bringing it into another world. And I will say that when it comes to the speculative fiction, I did think that Giddings wrote it very well and really made it flow correctly, but I just really wasn't gravitating to this novel very much. I thought it would be more interesting one, but it does explore the ideas of religion, faith, spirituality, the supernatural, as well as these two sisters and the bond they have. But other than that, I wasn't really a big fan of it, but I do recommend it if you're a fan of Giddens' work. And it is something that is, in my opinion, a quick read. So if you like that kind of supernatural speculative fiction, I recommend it. Almost Sisters is one that I did not like at all. I will admit I did not like it at all. It does have a bit of mystery thriller to it. It has a couple of triggering topics in it that I just want to forewarn you about. But other than that, I wasn't really a big fan of it. I felt it was a little too rushed. It wasn't a very intriguing plot to me, so it's not one I really enjoyed. I've never read Jackson's other works, but if you have other recommendations for her, please do put them in the comments. So there's not much I can really say about Almost Sisters. Other than that, I wasn't really a big fan of it. I liked Old School Indian. I did enjoy this one because it was very much a thought-provoking novel about the history of Native American tribes, especially in Mohawk territory, and how Abe tries to grapple with this. So Abe is the main character. He struggles with this rare autoimmune disease, and in 2016, when he's facing this challenge, he goes back to his ancestral homeland in the Mohawk territory, where he reconnects with some relatives and finds personal healing with them as well, and grappling with parts of his past and the trauma. And I did like this novel very much because it is very much of what I see with a lot of Native American indigenous tribe stories that I've seen, like They're There with Tommy Orange, where these characters are facing the realities of what their lives are like now, but also the prejudice, struggles, and identity they have. With Abe, he reflects on the fact that he struggled a lot with his indigenous identity within and outside the community, and the prejudices he faced outside of the community especially. He struggles with the fact that he doesn't have a very good relationship with his wife right now, as well as he having strained relations with his other family members who continue to do more of the traditional Mohawk territory type healing practices in keeping with their culture, their religion, and their language, even as it had gotten decimated by outside forces. But I really like this because it does bring the personal journey to it. Abe grows as an individual, and it comes to a conclusion that I felt was perfect for where he was at that point. So I do recommend Old School Indian. I thought it was a good read. It works well, and I really, really enjoyed it. They're There by Tommy Orange. This is one of my favorite books that I read years ago, and I reread it this year and still love and enjoy it. And the reason I do is because it's just such a well-written book that gets to the point of where it's got to go in good layers, great characters, and ones I really enjoyed. In fact, I loved all the characters, even with all their struggles, prejudices, and the challenges they face. And I also enjoyed seeing how they all are tied together, but also tied into the big event of the big Oakland powwow, which they're looking forward to, and trying to honor their heritage and culture, trying to connect with people and their family and friends and find their way in life. But it is a lot of drama. It does have some heavy depictions of what they face as a Native American indigenous tribe. And so there is a lot of warnings in there. So I just want to forewarn you about that. But I loved They're There. It was an excellent book. I still enjoyed it even 5 years after I read it. And it's really a wonderful thing. And I love how Tommy Orange has become an even better writer as time has gone on. I've read his other book, Wandering Stars, last year. And I do recommend entirely reading this book, They're There, his debut, and really just gravitating to it because it is just an excellent book, and I can't say enough great things about it, as you can see. Mansion Beach is one that I thought I would like because I didn't read the summary to it when I first saw the title. I saw Mansion Beach and thought, oh, summer read, beachside, must be a romance or something else. But I turned out to be wrong. It was actually about drama, self-reflection, family and friendship dynamics, and trying to overcome your past as you're trying to move forward in this business. There's also the fact of being on an island which is experiencing high volumes of gentrification and how that infects everything and affects the lives of the people living in this community. I did like the book in some aspects, but I wasn't very big on it. I didn't really like the ending, even though it makes sense for that conclusion. And I could see where the author was going with it, but I just wasn't really big on this book at all. I would recommend it if you are interested in reading that type of storyline where it's about a woman having to choose love or career, how they deal with gentrification in their neighborhood, what's going to happen because we're having these class divides of, hey, we live on this island for many years and we enjoy it and we love what it is, but now you're bringing the gentrification, the wealthy luxury and playground into this island, and we don't like that because it's driving business away and driving costs up and changing too much the fabric of it. So that was the more interesting aspect of it that I liked and enjoyed, because we are seeing that even today. But other than that, I didn't really like Mansion Beach very much, but would recommend it if you're interested in those types of themes and the idea of gentrification. Convenience Store Woman. So I've already done a review on this earlier this month, and I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to hear what I have to say about that book. And it's one of my favorites as well. I love everything about this, including the main character and how she navigates life as a 30-something, working in a convenience store part-time, but struggling to really find connections. And she does have friends and family members she connects with and has social life and everything, but her identity is all wrapped up in the convenience store. It's where she is most of the time. And she goes through this journey of trying to battle societal expectations, figure out who she is, and it all culminates in the way it needs to, where she discovers what she needs for herself. And this is just an excellent book. It's one that I will reread any day because it's that great and that magnificent. I really enjoy it. I connected with it, of course, because I was a 30-something who was in a job that I liked, but was feeling a little bit uneasy about, because even though I liked the job, I wanted to move on to other things, but I also was being judged, and at times I felt like I was being judged. Therefore, Convenience Store Woman really resonated with me when I read it in 2020, and I still enjoy it even now, 5 years later. It's a book I can read any day, and it's one of my favorites, so please be sure to read Convenience Store Woman, as it is also a short novella. So Violent Conspiracy does have a lot of triggering moments in it, as it talks about graphic depictions of enslavement as well as SA and heavy violence. And there's also a lot of racism and prejudice in it. So forewarned, that is in the book if you decide to read it. Now, when it comes to Violent Conspiracy, it is very much a mystery thriller, but I actually found what was interesting in the book was that it had more discussions on racism, prejudice, but also how this violin is at the center as the main character tries to really find this violin that's gone missing, that's a part and part of not only his career as a classical violinist, but also where he wants to be in his family history and what it reflects and it represents to his family. Now, for me, I wasn't really big on this book because even though it has a mystery thriller element to it, it really focused more on the history of enslavement, the racism and prejudice as it affects everyone in the book. And I know that it reflected a lot more of the author's feelings and experiences with his own racism and trying to get into the classical music industry and not being able to do because there isn't a lot of representation, a lot of struggles and prejudice that he faced. So that was a little bit more of an interesting aspect in Violent Conspiracy, just the racism, the prejudice, and how everything is centered into the Violent Conspiracy, but also how this violin relates to family history and where it needs to be and how it represents everything. But it's not something that I was too big a fan of, but I did like it in some aspects and do recommend it as a read because it is an interesting, thought-provoking novel as well as a mystery and thriller that does tie in pretty decently, I would say. I did like the 39 Steps. I've only ever seen the screen adaptation, so seeing the book itself or reading the book itself was a very good one. I liked the adventure, the espionage, the spy thrills to it. It was published in 1915, so is a product of its time and takes place just before on the cusp brink of World War I. And I did like the book overall. I thought it was a good book. It had the right kind of thrills, adventure, and spy espionage for myself. And I did enjoy it. It is, again, of course, a product of its time, but I do recommend reading it. But if you're not interested in the adventure, spy, espionage novels and prefer the screen adaptation, I recommend Alfred Hitchcock's version that came out in 1935. And it's good anyway, and I recommend it to anyone who's interested in the spy, espionage thriller. Word of warning, it is a product of its time, so some of the language might be a little bit off. But other than that, enjoy. Now, the two books that I did read that were by Edith Wharton were Ethan Frome and Summer. Now, I did like Ethan Frome because I felt it was a good short story novella. I liked the characters, I liked the drama in it. I felt the conclusion was the right way to go in such a short span of time as this novella is. And I know it's caused a bit of controversy here and there with some people, but I did like how it ended there, in which it showed there is a consequence to an action, and you feel for these characters, but it leaves a tragic ending, which felt right for the scope of it. So that's why I still do enjoy the novella and recommend it to everyone if they haven't gotten a chance to read it yet. As for Summer, I did not like this book. I remember reading it about 15 years ago and liking it, but now not so much anymore, and I think that's just because I've changed. And really, it's about a young girl, who's coming into her own and experiencing her own feelings and desires. But what made me not like it is just how it ended, where it makes sense for the time and place in which this was published in the early 1900s, but didn't make sense to me now. I actually wish there would have been a different ending, but I can see where Wharton had to conclude it by the end there. I would recommend it if you're a fan of Edith Wharton's works and you're a diehard hardcore fan of her works, but I wouldn't really waste my time with it too much. I think she has better works in Ethan Frome, Age of Innocence, The House of Mirth. But if you are a diehard Edith Wharton fan, then this is the work for you if you like all her works, despite the fact that some of them just aren't really up to speed in the talent that she had. Now, when it came to Kate Chopin's The Awakening, as well as her short stories, it was great to come back to these works again, and I really enjoyed doing so with a more mature head on my shoulders than I did many years ago. And what's interesting about The Awakening is that it was understandably very scandalous for its time in 1899 when Chopin published this book, and it's unfortunate that it destroyed her writing career and she passed on about 5 years after that. But what's great about The Awakening is that it is still very much an early feminist work that still resonates even today, about a woman coming into her own and trying to find herself outside her marriage and motherhood. It still is controversial, even with myself, because I have my own general opinions about it, but I get where Kate Chopin was going with it, and it is a sad, tragic end. It makes sense for that time because Chopin was aware of the fact that, hey, this is a consequence to the reality of the time and place in which we live in the 19th century. So it makes sense that tragic ending occurs. And I really did think it was a good way to create flow in the sense of place. And I noticed that about her short stories as well, is that she really creates a sense of place where you feel like you're actually in the scenery. You feel the trees, the water. Specifically focuses on the sea and the ocean, which stands as I guess you would say, a metaphor or foreshadowing of what's to come. And I really thought that was a good part of her work. As for her short stories, I actually feel this is where she excelled the most. In defense, this is where she did most of her writing throughout her career with short stories. But she really had a knack for doing that kind of medium, and I really think it gets to the point of where it has to go very quickly. Like, this is the plot, this is how it starts, the middle, the end, that's it. And it really creates that good climax. Now, of the short stories that I read, it was a mixture of different ones, including The Story of an Hour, The Storm, as well as Desiree's Baby, but I have a list for you right here. And just look over those stories. Now, of the ones that I liked in the short stories were The Story of an Hour, The Storm, the Desiree's Baby, as well as Beyond the Bayou. And I did like these stories. I enjoyed them. I thought they were good, poignant ones that really fit towards the end of them. And The Story of an Hour, as well as Desiree's Baby, is apparently, I think, the most popular of the short story novels, if I'm correct, in katechopin.org, which I'll leave in the description link. But I do think short stories are really the ones where Kate Chopin excelled the most. If you have not read her short stories, please do, along with The Awakening, because I think Chopin was a very good storyteller, so be sure to read her works. I thank you so much for tuning in to that segment of Simply Renee here at Sunday Reads with Renee. I'm going to do more full-fleshed out reviews for books in the future. As you know, I'm doing them twice a month right now, and I'm planning to do double books in October, where it's still going to be twice a month, but 2 books in one segment, if any of that makes sense. But I'm looking forward to doing that. And these are just like little quick opinions that I've done about the books, and I hope you will consider reading them if you haven't. And if you have, please let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear from you and get a sense of what you like, dislike, how you feel about the books, and see where it goes. So that is the feelings about the summer reads, and I'm glad I accomplished at least 27 out of the 30 books that I read, and I'm looking forward to bringing those 3 books into my fall reads. And speaking of my fall reads, here is the list, and I hope you enjoy. So as you see by that list, I do have some more nonfiction that I put in here because I realized I didn't put any with the summer reads, and I've gotten a couple interesting titles that have come my way, and I've decided to put more of them in here with the fall reads. I feel that's a good time for it. I'm also reading The Secret Chimneys by Agatha Christie. I read it a long time ago, and I'm reading it again this year because it's turning 100 years old for 2025, as it was published in 1925, as was The Great Gatsby and Mrs. Dalloway. Even though I like Virginia Woolf, I haven't really read Mrs. Dalloway before, so I'm actually going to read it for the first time and see how I feel about it. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to reading the other books as well, along with the 3 I didn't get to this summer, and we'll just put it into the fall. So I'm hoping these are nice, good fall reads that feel right for the moment. The Meet Me in London one is more of a Christmas themed one, and I have done Christmas themes in the past, and also a more Hanukkah one called The Matzo Ball. And I hope to really enjoy these books and share them with you. But I'm also looking forward to bringing more topics as we go forward. And I thank you so much for tuning in to this week's segment of Sunday Reads with Renee here on Simply Renee. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more Sunday reads, as well as outside of that. I'm hoping to bring more content soon. And I thank you so much for subscribing, watching, liking, and sharing my videos. I really appreciate it, and it helps my channel to grow. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and please have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.